right, I think we'll get started. Thank you, everyone, for logging in today. My name is Oh, that really hurt my ear. Sorry about that. My name is Megan McKenzie, and I am the Manager of Professional Development and Member Engagement for Caucus. And I'm really excited to introduce Patty Hambler today, who's going to lead us in some conversation and some participation about our communities of practice. So thank you to those of you who are on the line, and a special thank you for agreeing and volunteering to take some leadership in your community of practice this year. So we're really excited you're here. And with that, I'll hand it over to Patty. Thanks, Patty.
Thanks so much, Megan. I'm Patty Hambler. I work at the University of British Columbia, and I've been involved in one way or another with the caucus communities since the program or new organizational structure launched. So I'm excited to share some of the background, theory, and information about communities of practice. So we're not going to today get into a lot of the logistical aspects of communities of practice within caucus specifically. I think that's the focus of the in-person session, to talk about some of the tools and resources that are available through caucus for your community. What we are going to do today is talk about what some of the key foundational pieces of a community practice are, and hopefully this information will be helpful to you as co-leaders of your communities as you think about ways to encourage people to participate and get engaged within your community of practice. I've been involved myself in the spirituality and religious pluralism community of practice since it launched. I was a co-leader when that community started, and I'm now a member of that community. What I'd like to do is just maybe get us started with, in the chat box, if you could just say your first name and maybe where you're from, where you're connecting from today, what institution, and also which community you're leading. If you could do that right now, that would be great. And we are a small group to get started, but Megan has reminded me that some folks are notoriously known for being a bit late too. So we might have a few more people join us, which is great. And if not, we'll just be a small group. We'll record the webinar and can share it with others at a later time if they're interested. So we have Shannon from Memorial University with the Community Engaged Learning, and Lisa also from the Community Engaged Learning. And then we have, I see Alicia joining us, or I hope I pronounced your name right. If you don't mind introducing yourself in the chat as well, that would be great, just so we know who's here. And we'll go ahead and get started with the first interactive piece. We're trying out this new webinar platform that Caucus has, and we wanted to demonstrate as well some of the interactive pieces along the way so that you can think about ways you might use this platform for your meetings or for webinars that you might do within your community of practice. So I'm going to open up a poll, and I'm not sure exactly. Here we go. Can people see the poll there on the slide, hopefully, or on the screen? So what I'm showing here is a slide that has a few different images that represent different ways of thinking about learning. And so part of communities of practice involves sort of reflecting on what we think about what learning is and how to facilitate learning amongst professionals. So I just wanted to start with this really general question asking which of these images, A, B, C, D, E, or F, resonates with you as a metaphor for learning, and why? Why does that picture stand out for you? And there's honestly no right or wrong answer. If you could just share some of your thoughts, either in the chat or in the little uh, box there that asks for your answer, that would be great. And we'll just kind of see what people are sharing. Okay, so someone says, is it okay not to say none of them? They all make me really anxious. So that's an interesting response. Um, I don't know if you want to share a little bit more in the chat box of some of your thoughts there or in the response. And someone else has chosen C, so the image of the brain and lots of ideas and sort of thinking and talking going on. Yeah, I see the answer C there. And then someone who said they don't really like any of them. And then Megan likes E, so thinking of learning as non-linear and messy, things getting shuffled up and reforming. F, someone who loves to read and thinking about the role of reading within the learning process. I know for myself, probably I would choose A. I think uh, interaction for me is a key piece of learning, and so I always think about the role, as someone else has said in the poll of the facilitator and that role of interacting. And so Shannon's commenting that they're inorganic and there's no collaboration and conversation. So and A looks too authoritative. So you've got one person sort of standing up and everyone else sitting down. Um, so I think, when we think about learning, we all have our own ideas of what learning can look like and our own metaphors. And depending on maybe your educational background, if you've done some work in learning theories, you might have a more sort of a deeper analysis of what you think learning is. And we're gonna dive into some of those ideas today, and thinking about some metaphors for learning. The three key ones that I wanted to share that are important as we think about communities of practice are social learning theories and constructivist learning theories. And within those models, there are three common sort of uh, metaphors that are often shared when we think about learning. And I'm just going to move the poll out of the way here. I think I did that. So one of them is learning through acquisition. And so this is just a common metaphor that's out there when we think about, I think a lot of times we think about stereotypical types of learning environments, or when we think of school and tests and memorization and reading and sort of taking it all in, and this empty vessel kind of concept is one way of thinking about learning. Another way to think about learning is as participation. So with this metaphor, we recognize the social interactions that are needed within the learning environment and how people connect and grow together, learn from each other. And I always think of this metaphor as the learning is what is in the in between spaces, when groups or individuals come together and start to share and compare and grow and learn from each other. So that's another key metaphor that's important as we think about communities of practice. And a third metaphor that I want to share is learning as co-creation of knowledge. So within communities of practice, I would say this metaphor probably aligns most closely with what a community of practice is intended to be. And as we go through the webinar, you'll probably see that what a community of practice is intended to be can sort of shift as you move through the process with those that are involved. But I would say that Participation is definitely necessary within communities of practice, and of course, acquisition may always be one form of learning. But ultimately, a community of practice is defined by the co-creation of new knowledge and the coming together of ideas and solving of new problems as they emerge, and thinking about what that can look like within a community of learners who are there to share with each other and grow from the experience. I'm going to make a lot of reference in the webinar this morning to ATN Winger's work, and I'll share a couple of really specific resources that you might be interested in checking out. So if you haven't had a chance to look at Winger's work before, I would definitely encourage you to maybe take a look at some of his articles and do some thinking about reflecting on what some of that means to you. I had the opportunity to do a master's level social learning course where all we did for the entire course was read one of his books, and it took all of us reading it and sharing and talking about it to really understand and sort of deeply grasp what's going on within a community of practice. And the other thing is, for myself, I've had the opportunity to participate not only in caucus community of practice, but on our campus here at UBC within a community of practice for peer programs. And I was one of the facilitators or leaders of that community of practice for a few years. And so also have had the opportunity to think about Winger's work and how it applies in a couple of different settings. So I'll probably share some of that as we go through the rest of the webinar. So with Winger's work, he defines a community of practice as a group of people who share a concern, a set of problems, or a passion about a topic, and who deepen their knowledge and expertise by interacting on an ongoing basis. So I think for me, I've highlighted all of the components of this because I think each of these aspects of a community of practice are so important. So you can't have a community without having at least two people belong to the community. Uh, and then this sharing of a domain, which can be a concern, a set of problems, or a passion. And so within your communities, whether that's community engaged learning or case management or health promotion. I know there are a number of communities across Caucus, and you have exactly that, people who share a passion about the topic and about the work. And then this idea of deepening knowledge and expertise and this co-creation of knowledge through interaction. And so this is where the two metaphors come into play again, of co-creating knowledge as well as participation being an important aspect of a community of practice. So the three key components, and then there was supposed to be an image here, and I apologize for the yellow text, but that was the one technical glitch we couldn't fix before we started the webinar. But with this slide, we're just looking at the three sort of key aspects of a community of practice, or ingredients, if you will, which are the domain, the community, and the practice itself. So a clear and well-defined domain where there is a specific thematic orientation, and the domain is relevant and meaningful to members within the community. And the second is that concept of community, a group of more or less active members, and we'll talk more about how people can be differently active within the community, with a lively interest for the community of practice and its topics, and who also make it a priority to be part of that community. One thing to keep in mind, though, is that a membership within a community is often fluctuating and maybe isn't always stable. And then the third is the link to your practice. So members are active within the given domain. And occasionally you might have someone who maybe is a retired practitioner who's part of a practice, but they're still active in the practice and reflecting and contributing and being part of that. So sharing experiences, concepts, and strategies, which are really coming from the individual's reality of their practice. And so I just want to get a sense, and maybe people will try the hand raising function at this point. There's a little button at the top where you can raise your hand. How many of you, and we've had a few more people join us, but if you can just raise your hand, how many of you have belonged to a community or practice other than within caucus? So maybe within your home institution or some other organization where you've belonged to a community of practice. And can we just see from a show of hands? Okay, so it actually looks like almost everyone on the call has, or on the webinar has belonged to a community of practice other than caucus right now. So I think that'll be helpful as we go through the next pieces, which kind of move us past some of the theoretical pieces and get us thinking about the practicalities of co-leading a community of practice. So the first thing I want to do, and we're going to try some interaction again here, is we're going to move on to some myths about communities, myths and facts, if you will. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do a little poll, and let's see if I can get this going here. So this is just a true false poll. If you don't mind, just for the first one, communities of practice are always self-organizing. Would you consider that to be mostly true or mostly false? If you can just enter your ideas into the poll. Oh, poll is closed. Oh, now it's open. There you go. All right, so false, and you're absolutely correct that otherwise, why would we have co-facilitators and co-leaders of communities of practice? So, I mean, some communities do self-organize and can be very effective. I would imagine in those situations that leadership emerges from within the community of practice itself. But most communities do need some cultivation to be sure that members are getting high value for their time. So that's something to keep in mind is what kind of value can you help to cultivate within your community of practice that you're going to be co-leading. All right, so we're going to do another one here. Let's see. So we'll end that one, and then we're going to do a new one here. Oh, no, that's not what I want. Select poll. Okay. So the second one, there are no leaders in a true community of practice. So another way of thinking this is everyone is on the same footing. Everyone has the same role. Everyone, can both be a participant and a leader um, within a community of practice, and that there's no true defined leaders within a community. So we've got some people kind of shifting their votes around a little bit, but largely people are saying this is false, and I would agree, and ATN Winger would agree that this is mostly false. In many communities of practice, decisions need to be taken, conditions need to be put in place, strategic conversations need to be had. And not all members see value in being involved in those types of processes, and this is where we see different levels of involvement. So whether you call them leaders, coordinators, facilitators, stewards, someone needs to make some of those key decisions for the community to practice. And it's really good to recognize them for the role that they play, and that's a role that you're going to be able to play within your communities. I know within the community of practice that I belong to at UBC with peer programs, we eventually came to a model where we had what was called a leadership team, and that model worked really well for a number of years. I know there's some discussion currently underway of rethinking that. One of the ways I like to think of communities of practice is that they're living, breathing organisms, and they change depending on the needs of the community and sort of what's happening at any given time. But the leadership team model worked really well for our community of practice because it was exactly that. And even though I was technically in my role the coordinator of the community, I needed that small team of people to work together to make some key decisions and to have some strategic conversations as we move forward, and just have different perspective as part of the leadership of the community of practice. All right, so we're going to move on to a third question here. Uh, so this one is number 3. True communities of practice are informal. So would you agree that's mostly true or mostly false? Okay, so it looks like people are saying this is mostly false, and one person thinking maybe it's true. So ATN Winger, and I would agree again with this, would say this is mostly false. Again, there are many informal communities of practice, and there are formal ones as well. So it's kind of a mix, and so this could be true or false, but I think that the more intentionality that is behind the development of a community of practice, the more likely it is to have, uh, you know, success. And in order to for that to occur, then there probably has been some kind of formal process involved in getting to start the community of practice going. Oh, thank you, Megan. We're broadcasting the results. Okay, so I've sort of been sharing as we're going along, but you can see the results of number 3 right there. So we've got about 7 people online now, which is great. So welcome to everyone else who's joined. Um, so yeah, so communities can be informal, they can be formal, but typically there are some formal processes in the background, and people are thinking about the intentionality and the the work that needs to happen in order for a community to come together. And so let's try one more poll here and see if we can get this going. And we can broadcast the results. Oh, look at that. See, we're learning as we go. We're creating new knowledge here as a community of community leaders through this work. So the role of community practice is to share existing knowledge, true or false. So people can weigh in there, and we've got a bit of a mix here. So 71% say true, 28% say false. So with this one, it is partially true. So the experience people have to share is really important within a community of practice, but remember that there is that aspect of co-creation. So communities of practice also innovate and solve problems. They invent new practices, create new knowledge, define new territory, and develop a collective and strategic voice together. So one of the things that I'm excited to mention, and I see that Ellie is here as one of the new co-leaders of the Spirituality and Religious Pluralism Community of Practice. That community has been working hard on creating a monograph for caucus, and to me, that's an example of creating new knowledge. We've come together not only to share, but also to do research and to think about different aspects of religion and faith and spirituality on community on campus and university college um, communities, and through that we're essentially creating new knowledge as well as sharing the knowledge that we already have. So I'm not going to do polls for 5 and 6. I think, but I will share a couple of notes and also the resource I would really encourage you to take a look at. So I'm just going to share this on the chat box here if you wanted to take a look at that later on. So with number 5, good facilitation is all it takes to get members to participate. That's definitely false. Artful facilitation is definitely important, but there are many other reasons why people may not participate. Uh, the domain needs to be relevant and a priority to members. The value of participation usually needs to be recognized by the organization, otherwise members won't bother to participate. And members need to see the results of their participation and have a sense that they're getting something out of it. So good facilitation can be part of that, but it's not necessarily the reason why people participate in a community of practice. And then number 6 is kind of a maybe answer. There might be some technology out there. Sorry, but it is, if there is, nobody's really found it yet. There are so many new tools that are being developed all the time for collaboration online, and really a tool or technology is only as good as it is useful. As the people using it and how they're using it. So I know that's been a topic of a lot of the communities over the past couple of years since it's formed, and I know that Caucus is launching a new platform for interaction. And yet, I won't be surprised if we find that uh, there are things we want the new platform to do that it just doesn't do, or that we continue to find great tools out there that we still want to bring into our community of practice in some way, shape, or form. So technology, especially when you've got communities existing across the country, like we have with Caucus, technology is really, really important to help facilitate interaction. But it's not a magic bullet. You're going to have trial and error, and you'll see what is going to work best for your community of practice. But there really is no magic bullet with this one. So I would encourage you to take a look. There's some more myths that are shared on the website link that I've put there, and there's a lot of really other good resources that I'll probably mention as we go along through the rest of the webinar. The next thing I wanted to spend some time thinking and talking about is levels of participation. And I think this is really important because as a co-leader of your community, some of us, we're so passionate as co-leaders about our topic area, and sometimes I think we can make the mistake of expecting or hoping that everyone is going to be as passionate or as committed or as involved as we are as leaders of communities. And yet we know that everyone is different, people's roles on their campuses are different, and what they're looking for from the community may be very different as well. So levels of participation can vary across the community of practice. Typically, there is a core group at the center, and often this is a relatively small group of people whose passion and engagement energize and nurture the community in a variety of different ways. These are the folks who call the meetings, who think and talk about what the community needs, and put some of those things in place. And then in the next layer, there are usually a group of committed active participants. And these are the members who are recognized as practitioners and define the community for what it is. And as I mentioned, thinking about communities of practice as living organisms, it's usually the core and the active participants that really define how that organism takes shape and what it looks like and how it lives and breathes within the community. And then the next layer of occasional participants, there are some who only participate when the topic is of special interest. So, these would be folks that maybe attend your webinars but don't attend your regular meetings that you hold. They get involved when they have something specific to contribute, or maybe when they're looking for a specific answer to a specific question, or maybe when they're involved in a project that brings them looking for resources and information and knowledge and connection. And so within caucus, people can belong to multiple communities of practice. And I would anticipate that just based on my own experience, there are some that you are really involved in and others that you just kind of pop in and out of. There's another layer as well, which is peripheral participants. So those people who have a sustained connection, they stay on your list. They stay, um, checking the box on the caucus when they sign up for caucus, saying yes, I want to be part of this community. But they have a lot less engagement, either because maybe they're newcomers or they don't have as much personal commitment to the practice. They may be active elsewhere and carry learning to these places, and they may experience the community as more of a network than they do as a true community that they're actively involved in. And then outside of these spheres, there are also outside sort of folks that have interactions with your community of practice, and these can be thought of as transactional participants. They're outsiders who interact with the community occasionally without being members themselves. Uh, Sometimes they receive a service or gain access to artifacts produced by the community, such as its publications, websites, or tools. And thinking about caucus again, probably the other communities of practice, we can think of how they are transactional participants or sometimes maybe peripheral participants within your own community of practice, and recognizing that we are part of something bigger within caucus. And I've left when I created this visual, I put a dotted line around the outside because one of the if you do look deeper into Winger's theories around community of practice, he talks about boundaries of a community of practice and whether they're porous and open or whether they're closed boundaries. And this can be a really important aspect of communities of practice because if you allow the boundaries of your practice, community of practice, to be a little bit porous, it allows for some interesting interactions with other communities, with other domains that may be related or even not related to your domain within your community of practice. And it's what allows for, I think, really rich learning to take place when some of that interaction can happen. So just thinking about ways that where your community can be somewhat open to interacting with others outside of the community and what that looks like, and how knowledge from other domains is brought into your domain within your community of practice. So moving from there, oh, what does it actually look like? So for this one, I thought we could just do a bit of a brainstorm using the chat box. So what are the types of activities that might exist within a community or practice? So thinking about ones that you've belonged to before, that you currently belong to, this is what I like to call focusing on the ing of communities. So thinking about the verb, so for example, networking could be something that happens, or sharing could be something that happens. So, what are some of the other activities that you can think of? And if you don't mind just entering into the chat box, that you could see your community doing, or that you know other communities are doing, or that you have done as part of a community. So we have two people who right away typed supporting. I like that. Discussing best practices, sharing resources, definitely. What else? Connecting, creating new initiatives, energizing, delivering professional development opportunities, meeting members of your campus community you might not otherwise connect with daily. Yeah, absolutely. When a community of practice meets across a campus, or even um, within the caucus context, what I get so excited about with the community of practice model is often you're the only person within your department, or in some cases with the caucus communities, the only person at your institution that has the role that you have. And to be able to connect with others that have that similar role can be so energizing. So other people are talking about learning to talk about what we do in the language of administrators, asking questions, informing those outside the COP of the work you do, absolutely. Uh, Meeting students, acting as honest brokers between students, communities, educators, identifying common language. Oh my gosh, that is so important within a community of practice. I've been part of some really key discussions where people talk about, you know, language and the importance of words that we choose to use to describe our work and to describe our roles. Um, Reflecting on the impact of your work, absolutely. So having a sounding board, performing assessment, yes. Helping with grant applications, venting, absolutely. So lots of different ways that people. Sorry, sorry, I just muted myself for a second by accident. Scheming and dreaming. I love that. And maybe we'll end with feel free to keep entering your ideas, but scheming and dreaming, I love that. It's a space where you can connect with others uh, that that can truly understand your work. And so when you have that opportunity, yeah, you can dream up new possibilities. You can think about ways of doing your work and of talking about your work with others who have a shared understanding of what that work is. So it can be a very energizing and exciting thing to be involved in a community. And always remembering the metaphors of participation and co-creation of knowledge. So what are the different ways this can take place? So this next slide has a lot going on, and so I'll just walk you through some of what is happening here. And this was shared with me by a colleague, Shaylin from Canadian Mental Health Association. Her and I presented this workshop at Caucus the first year that the communities model launched. And it's got a lot going on, and it's got these like sort of weird shapes. But to me, this is a good way of thinking about communities of practice because there often is a lot going on. So learning activities can vary greatly within a community of practice. They can be informal or formal. You can have learning from each other and with each other. And often you can also have outside sources coming in and sharing knowledge with communities of practice. I'm just going to let you look at this for 1 second while I grab a glass of water. I'll be right back. Sorry about that, everyone. Um, so I'm back and I have a glass of water now. Um, so the different types of learning activities, thinking about I'm just walking through the 7 types that are up here. Exchanges, so tips, demos, stories, storytelling, document sharing, pointers to resources, news that can be shared across a community. Number 2, the category here is productive inquiries. So exploring ideas and maybe doing case studies together. Thinking about debriefing after something has happened and really asking some good questions. Number 3, building shared understanding. So hot topic discussions, polls, debates, joint events where you are able to maybe come together with another community of practice and think about um, a topic that you have in common. Number four, thinking about shared memory. How do you collect uh, information from across your community and document practices, learning projects, and finding ways to collaborate with others in doing this? Category five, creating standards. So thinking about best practices, benchmarking, how do you come together to develop some of those um, key understandings and shared expectations across a domain within a community of practice. Number six, there can be formal access to knowledge. So thinking about um, trainings and workshops and webinars and sessions at the Caucus conference, or times when you come together for maybe a speaker that you've invited and you have a regional gathering. And number seven is just thinking about visits and guests, so ways of um, bringing others into or going out into the community and thinking about what that can look like. So these are just thinking about those continuums of um, from and sort of with each other, and then informal, formal, and then outside and inside your communities of practice. And as someone has noted in the comments, we will share these slides afterwards so you can reflect on this as you move forward. Another way to think about communities is to think about ways of facilitating communities of practice and the kinds of group activities that you might want to engage in. And with this, another thing to keep in mind is what does this look like at a distance? So we can say that, we want to have, one-to-one conversations, one-to-many conversations, small group, large group, uh, and those can happen in many different ways at the annual gathering, at the caucus meeting, but they can also happen at a distance. So just as an example, thinking about mutual one-to-one learning where maybe you have some peer mentoring taking place, those could be things that you set up in your community. Maybe people have the opportunity to meet in person at the conference if they're attending, but then they connect one-on-one outside of um, that big meeting every year, and they can connect over the phone or over email if they have questions for each other. Um, and also thinking about what does networking and large group conversations, what do those look like when you have people in Nova Scotia and people in Vancouver? And what does it look like? How do you take advantage of the many different ways that you can engage in person when you are at the annual conference or when you host a drive-in workshop, perhaps, and versus the times when you are only able to connect uh, via different types of online platforms. So I'm not going to go through each of these, but I just wanted to give you kind of a smattering of different things that you can think about as you get ready to engage in community of practice. And so Megan's commenting of using lots of different ways of engaging folks. So not only communicating in one way, creating different spaces for different formats of communication and engagement is absolutely important. Um, some people don't don't like connecting online, and maybe they prefer email as a way of just being able to write and share, or maybe they're really looking forward to that annual opportunity to get together in person. So a couple of closing pieces to think about, key considerations, conditions for fostering effective social learning within a community of practice. taking the time to develop trust. So don't rush the formation of a community and recognize that it takes time to identify common values. And I'll add another layer to this is that often this work has to occur over and over again within the community of practice. And so I mentioned earlier on that the people who are part of a community of practice define what that community is. And with that in mind, that means that every year a community is going to look a little bit different. And this trust and developing of and identifying common values, it needs to continually take place. And so I would encourage you to think about that, especially if you're a community leader who's been involved in your community since it started. And so you have that history and knowledge of how the community started and what some of those initial conversations were, what the common language was at the time that community developed. And now you're at a different place with your community, and it's not like you're starting from scratch because you have a strong foundation to build off of. But in order to welcome new people into the community, you have to provide some space for them to help co-create what that community is. And so just thinking about what does that look like when you're inviting new members, that it's not just, hey, come join us, we're doing all of these things and we want you to be part of it, but it's, hey, come join us and help us to create something that you feel that you've contributed to and that you can be part of. And the second piece here is also being open to the experience, learn and grow together, and recognize that your community of practice membership, as I said, will define who and what you are at any given time. And I love the comments that are coming up right now around establishing a community of practice for the COP leads and having an opportunity to maybe unpack some of this when when perhaps you're attending caucus, that could be an opportunity. I know for myself, this this really higher level thinking really motivates me as a member and as a leader of a community of practice. And so, yeah, if there's interest when you gather together to have some of these conversations and also to think about, I think with the new platform, there will be more opportunities to connect with each other as leaders and to be thinking about some of this and sharing. If you go back to the different types of things that can happen within a community of practice and you try something new within your community and definitely share what that was with your fellow community leaders and say, we did this and this is how we hosted a World Cafe online, or this is how, we've organized our leadership group and how it works for us. And not so that all of our communities can be the same, because I think by definition they're going to be very different from each other, but just so that we can continue to learn from each other as we move forward. And then the last sort of thing is to remember to encourage a range of involvement. And so, um, you know, think about ways that you might vary the opportunities within your community of practice and ways that you can involve a variety of different folks within your community. And so maybe we'll just end with this, and we can use the discussion platform at the bottom here to either put an answer that you have to this question, or if you have another question that you want to ask, and I can either try to answer it or put it out to the group to answer. So we'll just take a few minutes on the chat and see what people are thinking about in terms of ways to encourage a range of involvement within your community, and any other questions that you might have. And maybe I'll also think I'll offer Megan if she wants to make any comments on anything that I've shared, to go ahead and jump in. So I see lots of people are typing is what it's telling me right now. So Megan has shared that one of the first projects on the new platform is to establish a resource section for COP facilitators, which is great. And I know that we do have folks who are overseeing what the COP model looks like within caucus. Every year we have a couple of members of the caucus board whose role it is to look at that. So I'm sure they'll be involved in that as well. Um, and then let's see what else. Strong collaboration of co-chairs drawing on their own contacts from respective regions. Absolutely. So a good way to think about involving people in different contexts is to leverage your own membership to reach out to other people and think about what that can look like. An example again within the spirituality and religious pluralism community of practice, it's really the core and active members who've been involved in creating this new monograph. But then we had our meeting earlier in the week and talked about how we would reach out to other people on our campuses to do the review process for the monograph. And so, reaching out to your members to leverage their contacts is really important. Um, Establishing short and long-term goals for the group as a group allows people to contribute right away. Absolutely. So thinking about, you may have some overarching goals and visions for your community of practice as one of the co-leaders and maybe as one of the people who's been involved for a long time, but opening up that discussion and saying what can this look like together. And so let's see, hoping that people realize that this community exists and are interested in engaging with their peers to help get the ball rolling. Uh, Leveraging new professionals and seasoned professionals to share and bring together knowledge, which is exciting. Uh, Identifying action items, assigning them, having deadlines for sure. I think that's something that I've seen within our caucus community. Um, our co-leader has been very good at setting deadlines for people as a way to motivate. Um, you know, uh, so I think sometimes people are hesitant to do that within this type of environment because you know that people have their full-time jobs, but we also often are motivated by deadlines. So keeping that in mind. Otherwise, things might not get done. So being able to do that, reaching out to new people, responding to different needs. Yes, thinking about toolkits and reviews. Yeah, and doing some kind of survey, asking your members what they want to try, or what they would want to bring. So if, asking people, what they're looking for, doing a bit of a survey, is always a good thing. And also asking people, what do you want to contribute to this community of practice? Megan is talking about presence. The community won't grow unless there are people there. Establishing small things we could do to help folks find their space in the community. Reaching out, helping people connect. Absolutely, within the spirituality and religious pluralism community of practice, we have a membership, uh, sort of a couple people whose job it is to exactly just do that, to do the reach out, to um, to connect with folks and invite them to participate. And within um, our community of practice and peer programs here at UBC, we did eventually develop a set of community guidelines, what it means to be part of the community, what the expectations were as a member of the community. And one of the things that we did is when someone was interested in joining the community, we would make sure that there was an actual conversation that took place with each person. Now, that may not be possible with your caucus community because it may end up being quite large depending on what it is. But those one-on-one connections can be really helpful for engaging people and bringing them into the conversation. Um, and then some unique challenges depending on what your community is, definitely. So we need to think about that. And consistency for sure. So consistency is really important. And sometimes, especially when you're using online platforms, it can feel like you're talking into a void sometimes. But just remember that there are often, people out there. the lurkers, the ones who are listening and maybe not responding, and just have confidence that your message is getting out. But continually getting the word out is important, and having that consistency um, of sending out information or sharing or inviting people to participate. I think we're going to wrap up there. Lisa does have a question of how do we know who the community members are. So I might let Megan respond to that, and also just pass it back over to Megan to maybe share any little tidbits of anything that people can expect in the near future as part of the group of community leaders, and as well when you gather together at the caucus conference in Ottawa.
Sure. So thank you, Patty, so much. I've learned so much in the last hour, and I'm sure that all of our participants have as well. I think and you said it really early in the presentation, this idea of communities of practice being about co-creating knowledge and co-creating those experiences that we all have. And I think we get so caught up in this day-to-day, I have to send this email and this deadline is coming up, that it just becomes people sending emails out to people who are out there and maybe reading them and maybe not. So I think that this type of conversation has to happen more often in our annual cycle around what are we talking about with our members and what does that look like. So thank you so much, Patty. So there were a couple of questions. So Lisa, you asked about how do you know who your members currently are? Because we're at that time of the year where memberships are trickling in and membership, some people are renewing and some people aren't. So we will send the chairs of each community a membership list. The other thing that you'll have once we're into our new online platform, and I'm talking really soon, like potentially Monday is what we're shooting for, you'll be able to communicate with your community in the platform. So you'll have messaging system. You won't have to rely on us to send out emails. So there's lots of new communication systems that are built into that platform. And if you're attending on the 10th, we're going to do some great training and walking through some demos and different things. So we'll be able to do some really great planning as well for planning how you can communicate with your members through the year. So I'm very excited, and I hope you are too. So if there's no more questions or anything else, I think we'll wrap up. But thank you so much for giving up time in your day to attend this webinar. It's beautiful here in PEI. I've heard the weather's pretty nice in Ontario. So, and I don't know, Patty, what it's like out in BC. But thank you so much for giving up your lunchtime, if it was your lunchtime. And I'm looking forward to seeing some of you in Ottawa in a couple of weeks.
Okay, bye, Megan. Bye, everyone.
Oh, it's still cold in Winnipeg.
And it's raining in Vancouver.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Raining in Vancouver. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much.